Our denomination here at Mile High Church is called religious science. And an essential part of our faith is that we honor all paths to God. We seek to include the wisdom of all the great spiritual traditions. All that being said, there are some things that I think make us extra special. And one of them, it's one of the reasons I am a religious scientist, is I believe more than any of the faiths, our faith connects with the central prayer that is the basis for our country. The prayer of liberty, justice, and the pursuit of happiness for all people. On the very first page of Ernest Holmes' The Science of Mind, he says, "The divine plan is one of freedom. Bondage is not God ordained. Freedom is the birthright of every living soul." What a beautiful prayer for each of us to hold in our consciousness, that this belief in liberty and justice and the pursuit of happiness for all is not just a political belief. For us, it's an article of faith. Imagine that. Everyone on this planet living in freedom. Imagine that. Every person on this planet receiving justice and equal opportunity. Imagine everyone free to pursue their joy, their happiness, as long as it doesn't infringe on anyone else's. What a beautiful prayer to hold in our hearts. And we know here, through our practice of affirmative prayer, that when we ask God for freedom, it's not usually as simple as, "Here you go, Josh." But God gives us everything we need to realize that prayer. And I believe that God gave America this divine idea, everything that it needs to realize this prayer. In our own lives, it can take a lifetime. In our own country, it's taken 250 years and will take even more, for this prayer never ceases. And we struggle for it, and people die for it. And people are inspired by it. And our country has produced some of the most incredible individuals who ever lived as demonstrations of this prayer to help us to realize it in our everyday lives for ourselves and then for our country and for the world. July 4th marks the birthday of America, but I want to argue today that our country has gone through many births, many rebirths, and it will continue to do the same. One of these rebirths happened early in our nation, September 19th, 1796, the day that George Washington relinquished power. Now, the King of England, when we won our freedom, and all of the other world leaders thought we were incredibly naive, the ex-British citizens, to think that America could be a democracy, that it could be people-led. Surely, before they know it, they'll have a monarch. Near the end of the Revolutionary War, this almost happened because the Congress wasn't paying our troops. You'll be shocked to know that Congress had a low approval rating at the time. And there were letters circulating all around prepared to fight and install George Washington as king. And when he heard this, he gathered all of his leaders around and he chastised them and criticized them for doing just that. "Nonetheless, I will get you the money that you are owed." When it was time to elect George Washington president, a title was proposed: His High Mightiness, the President. "Just president will do," Washington replied. He served 2 terms, and the country was still in tumult. It was struggling in so many different areas that all the other world leaders thought that for sure Washington would not give up power. And yet he did, and he didn't even speak. He shared and had published a farewell address in every newspaper in the country, sharing things like, It should be the highest ambition of every American to extend his views beyond himself and to bear in mind that his conduct will not only affect himself, his country, and his immediate posterity, but that its influence may be coextensive with the world and stamp political happiness or misery on ages yet unborn. And so we have the birth in our country of the peaceful transfer of power, an affirmation that the people are more powerful than the president, and the formation of this key part of the American character that I feel we need to be getting back to, that I am no better than anyone else. But guess what? Nobody's better than me either. Maybe Roger Teal. that basic aspect that honors our equality and individualism. Another birthday, January 1st, 1863, the day that the Emancipation Proclamation was introduced. President Abraham Lincoln, seen as our symbol of American leadership because of his character, his humility, his firmness, and most essentially, his kindness, his inclusivity. President Lincoln wrote so many letters, but so few got delivered, because what he would do when he was angry is he'd write vicious, mean, criticizing letters of whoever he was criticizing, and then you know what he'd do? He'd throw them in the fire. He had a Secretary of War, Edwin Stanton, part of the famous team of rivals, and Stanton one day is so angry at a general, and Lincoln suggests, you know what, you should write him a letter. Stanton does. It takes him 2 days just letting this guy have it. It's good spiritual practice. Just having at it. And he reads it aloud to Lincoln, and he gets it all out, and Lincoln says, oh, what are you going to do with that letter? So what the hell are you talking about? I'm going to mail it to the guy. And Lincoln invites him to throw it in the trash can. And begrudgingly, he does. The summer before the Emancipation Proclamation, Lincoln and his family famously lived at a place called the Soldier's Home. Early in the morning, he would ride a horse to the White House, and in the evening, he'd ride a horse back. He needed to connect in the midst of this time when America was most apt to be torn asunder, to his spiritual roots, to a deeper place in consciousness. And it is there that he began to articulate and envision, with help of people like Frederick Douglass, the Emancipation Proclamation. He couldn't declare slavery over because of the Constitution, and yet because of the South's behavior, he was able to declare it as an act of war, to release and declare that slavery would be illegal in the United States. Some people thought it came too late. Some people thought it came too soon, that you'd never get the other side back to the table. Yet it was a result of pure prayerfulness and vision. In an ancient Taoist teaching, there's a fella named Shuangzi, and he tells the story about a woodworker named King who constructs and has been commissioned to create a Bellstand for the royal court. And he unveils this Bellstand, and everyone thinks it's the most beautiful piece of art, its precision, its magnificence, its beauty that they've ever seen. And they ask him how he did it. And he began by saying, well, first I meditated until all distractions, all noise went away. And then I fasted until I could release myself from all of my bad habits. And then I prayed, so I was so clear that there was no part of me seeking praise, even from the royal court. I prayed so long so that all I could see was the perfection and the beauty of the Bellstand. Then I went to the forest to see the trees in their own natural state. When the right tree appeared before my eyes, the Bellstand also appeared in it, clearly beyond doubt. All I had to do was to put forth my hand and begin. What does it mean in our own lives to cut out the noise? To stop being so hard on ourselves. to fast until we're released from those habits that are not relieving but creating anxiety for us. To release all attachment to attention so that we can only see that divine idea for our lives, that we can begin to carve it out of any experience. And what does it mean to hold this type of truth for our country? To know and realize and get so intimate with that prayer for freedom, for liberty, for justice, for the pursuit of happiness, that we see it so clearly in children playing, in the beauty of an old architected state house, even in the midst of the noise. What does it mean to turn off the noise, to fast from those bad habits, and to get from that prayerful place that allows us to have our vision for our country be something so clear we could carve it out of anything? Gabriel Garcia Marquez, the great novelist, shared, "Human beings are not born once and for all on the day their mothers give birth to them, but life obliges them over and over again to give birth to themselves." He didn't intend it for our country, but I would apply it to that we've had opportunity after opportunity to give birth to ourselves. August 18th, 1920, the day that the 19th Amendment giving women the right to vote was ratified. After years of protest, and even more than that in front of the White House, Woodrow Wilson finally gave in and realized it might be nice to have some more voters. And yet, 2/3 of the states have to confirm the amendment for it to become law. And it came down to the state of Tennessee, and a letter written by a woman named Feb Byrne, that a young legislator, her son Harry Byrne, had in his pocket. And it was contentious. They called it the War of the Roses in the legislature. If you wore a red rose, that means you were against women's suffrage. If you wore a yellow rose, that meant you were for it. And Harry had a red rose on that day. And people didn't think it was going to pass, and some people changed their vote, and it was tied. And here, Harry, the youngest member of the legislature, the vote was going to come down to him, suffrage or no. And he grasped the letter that he had, which said things like, "Hurrah, and vote for suffrage, and don't keep them in doubt." And Harry made the decision to vote for suffrage that day, and we have a very different country because of it. Would momentum have found another way? Most certainly. Would Feb probably be the better person serving the legislature at the time than her son? Most definitely. Yet that's how the birth and the rebirth of our country happens so often. So many people die, so many people dedicate their lives, and the opportunity comes to step into it if we can hold that higher vision. One more date. August 6, 1965, the day the Voting Rights Act passed, where it was made illegal in our country to discriminate against people who wanted to vote. John F. Kennedy had been killed horrendously. Lyndon Johnson, who was not elected, became the president. He was a master legislator, and he made the commitment to choose this as his crowning achievement. And here he was, this white guy from Texas, even with a drawl, addressing Congress and saying, "I speak tonight for the dignity of man and the destiny of democracy. At times, history and fate meet at a single time in a single place to shape a turning point in man's unending search for freedom. There is no Negro problem. There is no Southern problem. There is only an American problem. And we are met here tonight as Americans, not as Democrats and Republicans. We are met here as Americans to solve that problem. There is no issue of states' rights or national rights. There is only the issue of human rights. But even as we pass this bill, the battle will not be over. What happened in Selma is part of a far larger movement which reaches into every section and state of America. It is all of us who must overcome the crippling legacy of bigotry and injustice." And Johnson famously took those words from the civil rights movement, this white guy from Texas. "And we," he said, "shall overcome." What a wonderful truth to know for that prayer of our nation, that we shall overcome. What's next? What's our next rebirth? What's our next reinvention to better embody the prayer, the divine idea for America? I'm interested in AI, artificial intelligence, but you know what I'm interested in even more? FI, female intelligence. When we get to that point in our state legislatures and in our governor offices and in our Congress and in our executive branch where we have as many, if not more, women serving, how will that change our country? Peace. Clarity from the crowd. I'm interested in the expansion of knowledge for our children, having broadband internet available for all of them so that they can better learn and have equal opportunity to education. I'm so excited to see what that can do for our nation. I'm so excited for us to get our house in order so that we can better embody a prayer that holds patriotism as holding our country accountable to achieving the prayer of liberty and justice and the pursuit of happiness for all, so that we can be an example for one another, but for the world, where there are so many people who need that prayer. And I look forward to spiritual communities like ours that says that you can achieve the American dream no matter what your religion is, no matter who you choose to marry, no matter your political affiliation, that it's for all, that the blessing of the divine, its highest qualities are for all people, no matter what. It's an election year, which means it's my favorite time to give this talk. Anyone here experiencing a little anxiety? A little anxiety about the election? Boy, that debate sure helped. Because people get pessimistic. They get angry. They get despondent. Some people are already unhappy because they're not pleased with the candidates who are running, so they already feel a sense of loss. Then there are those of us who are prepared. What am I going to do if the other guy wins? What am I going to do? Honey, I hear they have some great health care in Europe. Those Canadians are so friendly. Some real estate prices are not so high up in Mexico. The anxiety is real. I have it too. But you can possess your anxiety and not let it possess you. And for me, when I think of all those people who've died for that prayer of America, all those people who dedicated their life to it, staying true to that prayer and that vision no matter what is so incredibly important to me. You can choose to just be despondent, kind of like the Jedis after the Empire take over. You can just kind of wander and be wise and recluse, but just totally detach yourself from anything that's going on in the country. Or you can do what our teaching teaches us to do when we're at our most anxious, which is to remember the truth, to know the truth of who you are, to remember the truth of the divine idea for your country, and seek to be a conduit and a champion for it. Abraham Lincoln, the height of the Civil War, is said to have shared the following story, that he was once boarding with a Presbyterian minister on a train. And one night the minister woke him up, "Arise, Abraham, the day of judgment has come." And he's pointing out the window, and Lincoln looks out the window, and there's a meteor shower. So there's literally stars falling from the sky and bolts of fire going on. And Lincoln shared with the people he was sharing with, "I saw those falling stars, and I saw all of those fireworks. And yet past them, I could still see those grand old constellations holding the universe in place. My friends, the universe did not end that day, and the union will not end now." How can we, no matter how concerned or anxious we may be, hold that kind of truth for one another in our country? To see those grand old constellations and get past the fireworks that need our attention, but we can always see more and beyond. How can we do that? One, a little less news. Too many of us, we watch news for entertainment instead of for information. So we can't help but see elections as slobber knockers, the battle of the century. And we can't help but sometimes demonize the polarities on the other side. Get your news. Get all the information you need to make the highest and best decisions as you vote. But nothing more than that. Get out of those. Second, what the Buddha called the middle way. Get off of the fringes and get back to center. And by that I don't mean be a centrist, be a proud conservative, be a proud liberal, but recognize that the fringe is defined by needing to demonize the fringe on the other side. That fringes tear apart. They never bring together. In the middle way, we seek not judgment, but understanding. We practice not blame, but curiosity. We seek to solve problems, not just to point them out. And lastly, have that grand faith in your country. Not a naive faith, but a bold faith that can behold those constellations no matter what. What are those constellations for me? Those stars in the sky, I've already mentioned them. It's all of those incredible service people, those incredible individuals and activists, those incredible leaders who either died or dedicated their life to the well-being of our country and answering our nation's prayer. I look up and I see the constellation of Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass. I see the star system of Paul Robeson and Martin Luther King Jr. I see the shining star of Eleanor Roosevelt and Susan B. Anthony. I see the star of Lyndon Johnson, of Ronald Reagan, of George H.W. Bush, of John McCain. So many stars that you may not agree with their politics, but you can respect the dedication of their life's work and their service. Follow those stars. Follow those teachers that shined brightest for you, and do not forsake the lessons that they teach. That America is a divine idea, but it can only come about through our individual lives and the example we set in encouraging others to embody that great liberty, that great justice wherever we see injustice, and that pursuit and that right each of us have to fulfill that joy in our heart that seeks our God-given freedom in that deep knowing of the sacred that resides in all of us. The motto of the great state of South Carolina says, "While I breathe, I hope." While I breathe, I hope. Let's take a deep breath. While I breathe, I hope. There's no greater spiritual gift that any of us has been given than the gift to hope, to imagine, to find, like King did in that Bellstand, that vision for greater harmony within ourselves. And our work is to dedicate ourselves to making it a reality. As we move into prayer this morning, invite any of our prayer practitioners who'd like to stand and join me. These wonderful folks are available for prayer after service. And I share these words from a famous prayer by our founder, Ernest Holmes, called "My Prayer for My Country," where he shares, "I know that divine intelligence governs the destiny of the United States of America, directing the thought and the activity of all who guide its affairs. I know that success, prosperity, and happiness are the gifts of freedom and the divine heritage of everyone in this country. I know that divine guidance enlightens the collective mind of the people of this country. I know that no one can believe or be led to believe that personal freedom must be surrendered in order to ensure economic security for all. I know that this spiritual democracy shall endure, guaranteeing to everyone in this country personal liberty, happiness, and self-expression." So moving into a moment of prayerfulness with the clarity of the Bellstand, may we open ourselves up to a greater vision for our own lives and the grandest vision we can have for our country. We do not turn away from the suffering in our country or the suffering in the world. We do not turn away from the problems that we see manifesting and our desire to solve and move beyond them. And yet, we hold true to all of those who have demonstrated the possibility of the prayer of America, who died perhaps never experiencing it in full, but also knowing deep in their hearts the future generations, including the one we are today, to see it through for ourselves and for our future loved ones tomorrow. May we also embrace, recall, unearth, nurture, and give thanks for the divine idea for our individual lives. How can I best express my freedom? How can I best embody justice? As the great Viktor Frankl remarked, for the Statue of Liberty on the East Coast, we need a Statue of Responsibility on the West Coast. How can I best embody freedom and the responsibility that comes with it today? And how can I best pursue living my best life in awareness of all the gifts of God so that I may use them today? We let it be, we let it become, and so it is.